Nigeria's aviation sector. Green Africa Airways, a new entrant in Nigeria's aviation space, has reportedly introduced low ticket prices for certain destinations, which also has other airlines, taking notice of their entry into the marketplace. So we'll be discussing their strategy plus more with our analyst, our guest, Sanyade Okoli, CEO of Alpha African Advisory. I almost said Arise Business Analyst because you're always on. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you. What do you make? We've talked a lot about South African Airways, and in fact, every time we talk about aviation, I think we're usually talking about the struggles, whether it's in another country. So, what do you make of this new entrant coming in at this particular time? What do you make of the timing of?
The timing makes sense in that. So, what has been reported is that Green Africa will be coming in at much lower prices, and we already see that other established airlines have started bringing down their prices to be able to compete more effectively.
Yeah.
But why I think the pricing, the entrance at this time makes sense is, first of all, they have been working on it for a while, and it is what it is.
Right.
But two, right now, due to the insecurity issues, etc., more people are looking to fly rather than travel by road. And obviously that is a, shall we say, low to medium price bandwidth that those people are looking at. And the prices of tickets have gone through the roof before this entrance.
Yes.
So it just made it very unaffordable for people. So it does make sense.
What about the strategy of low ticket prices when you consider how much it costs to maintain an airline? The maintenance that takes place overseas, the FX requirements and so on. Is it, that price points, considering the cost measures, does that make sense?
What has been clear for a long time is that Nigeria has required a budget airline. Having said that, Green Africa, my understanding is the planes, certainly the planes they're starting off with, are turboprop planes.
Right.
Which are, one, more cost-effective from a fuel efficiency standpoint.
Yes.
But they are also cheaper to acquire, cheaper to maintain, insurance, etc. So they are coming in with a lower cost proposition, not just a lower price.
Now, they're lower cost, but then they're not as fast as your regular jet airplanes. So I take it that makes sense, I guess, from a cost perspective, because from efficiency.
It's a regional airline.
Right.
So turboprops work for short to medium distance journeys.
Yes.
And that is their plan, short to medium distance journeys. I haven't seen anything to suggest that they'd be looking at, certainly in the immediate term, even when I say regional now, African regional or international flights. When I said regional before, I meant local, domestic, within Nigeria.
Right. How long do we know if this strategy? How long does it take before we know if this strategy works? Does it take 1 month or 1 quarter? Private companies, so they won't reveal financials or anything like that. But if you were the head of strategy, how would you,
I would review everything very closely. First, on a monthly standpoint, see how I'm doing compared to what I had expected on a quarterly basis. But I wouldn't begin to make huge shifts in my strategy until I've seen a few quarters go through.
Gotcha. Okay. We spent a lot of time talking about airlines. In fact, right here on Arise News, what was it, about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, we covered, I think it was a number of states. One of the states that was picking up, the cargo airline, right?
Yes.
Or cargo airport.
New airport in Anambra.
Yes, cargo airport.
That's my state, by the way.
Fantastic.
By marriage.
Thanks for sharing that. Great. So you would know about that. Privatization of airports. They're all state-owned, right? So I want to get your take on.
Rotus, you know the answer.
I do know the answer.
You know it's a no-brainer. You know we've talked about it.
Yes.
The reality is, for a lot of these assets, government are not best placed to run them effectively, efficiently, etc., etc.
Right.
One is because they don't have the capital required to make some of the necessary investments for the maintenance. They also don't necessarily have the skill sets. So absolute no-brainer. A whole lot of these assets should be privatized.
Well, what would any investor that is wanting to come into this space to privatize an airport, what are they going to look for before they say, I'm going to come into your state and and want to work with the state to privatize the airport?
Enabling regulatory framework, that knowledge that when they come in, the next government is not going to, one, overturn the transaction, two, bring about huge swings in the regulatory framework that completely kills their business model.
Gotcha.
I'll start with those two.
Fantastic. Well, I have to ask you about this news about Germany and this atonements, 1.1 billion euros, that's about $1.3 billion that they're extending to Namibia for what happened in the past. We've talked about it on the morning show, we've talked about it at our top of our segment, but I really want to get your take on,
I must admit, this is a story that is difficult not to get emotional about.
Right, of course.
Especially when you read the backstory. Because we're talking about 1904, genocide of about 100,000 people who had resisted essentially German occupation. And for some of those, the two tribes that you mentioned, we're talking about, for some of them, over half their population were killed. And I want to position 100,000 people vis-a-vis Namibia's population today of about 2.6 million people. So this is not a large country in terms of population. And in 1960, their population was about 660,000. So I give you those data points for you to get a sense of quite how significant the 100,000 is. Now, on the one hand, you'd say, yes, the acceptance of the wrong has to be a good thing. The apology is another good thing. The third leg is about the compensation. Of course, there are people who question how adequate this compensation is. You ask yourself, how much is okay for having slaughtered so many people? And it's not just the killing, it's the maltreatment, chaining, starvation, poisoning their water, etc., etc. So there's a whole slew of very horrific things that happen. How much is okay? It's very difficult to put a finger on, but I'm quite sure that one of the data points that some of the Namibians who are pushing back on this are using would be, of course, the Jewish Holocaust, because it's still the same perpetrators, Germany. And as at 2019, I know that at least about $80 billion of compensation had been paid in various ways and forms to the Jews. And the breadth of the compensation goes so far as to, like in 2019, Germany agreeing to pay support to the spouses of Holocaust survivors.
So that was an additional.
Even some of the non-Jewish people who helped the Jews were paid support. And there's so many different fronts. I think that is part of the tension why some people feel that the 1.1 billion euros is insufficient.
Gotcha. Just a minute ago, does it set a precedent? Macron just left Rwanda. He was apologizing there. That's the president of France. He's now going to South Africa, I think, for more talks with other African leaders. Does it set a precedent?
I'm sure it does, and that's why it's taken so long for it to happen, because it could open floodgates. That would be every European colonizing country's concern.
Sanyade Okoli, CEO, Alpha African Advisory, thank you so much for joining us to talk about these headlines.
Thanks.